I've made tiramisu a few times and I've almost always been happy with the result. However, I've never followed a recipe and kinda just made it my own way. The plan with this video was to show you how I make this delicious dessert. But since I never wrote anything down and never knew what made my version so delicious, I totally failed to reproduce it. So, instead of showing you a perfect recipe, I'll show you what I did wrong this time. I start off by making my first mistake. Homemade ladyfinger cake. With 2 eggs I separate the yolks from the whites. I whisk the whites to a pretty thick consistency. I measure 72 grams of sugar and put about half of it in the whites and the other half of it in the yolks. I whisk both the whites and the yolks with the sugar in them and pour the yolks into the whites. I then sift 98 grams of flour in the mixture and 2 grams on the table. I add a pinch of salt and the rest of my vanilla extract, which was about half a teaspoon. I then fold the mixture carefully and place it on top of a baking paper in an oven dish. I spread the mixture into an even layer before placing it in a 175 degrees Celsius oven for 15 minutes. To make it crispy like normal ladyfingers, you probably need to leave it in for about 30 minutes. The reason this was a mistake is because it's a bunch of more work for something that isn't better than the store-bought version. Unless maybe if you're a master pastry chef. The consistency and light and crunchy texture of correctly made ladyfingers are important to suck up the proper amount of coffee mixture. This is one of the most important things to get right when making tiramisu, in my opinion. My homemade ladyfinger cake became a dense, chewy and slightly dry part of the dessert. Now onto the mascarpone cream. Traditionally, the creamy part of a tiramisu is made of stiff whisked egg whites together with mascarpone, egg yolks and sugar. I'm not a huge fan of raw eggs in my desserts, and there is a superior option to stiff egg whites. That is whipped cream. It's easier to handle and I think it tastes better. Instead of egg yolks and sugar, I use sweetened condensed milk. So far so good. The mistake I made here was that I put the condensed milk and mascarpone separately into the bowl of whipped cream. This made the mixture lumpy, and in order to get rid of the lumps I had to whisk a lot, which I think took away the light and fluffy texture of the whipped cream. The better way here would be to mix the condensed milk and mascarpone together first and then fold in the whipped cream. I also didn't have the right ratio of the 3 components, so the creamy mixture came out a bit too runny. Another mistake I made was to not add a pinch of salt in the cream mixture. I tried a bit of salt on the dessert later on and it was elevated. It's now time to assemble the dessert. I have a bowl of cold, strong coffee, in which I pour a bit of Italian liquor. I then take a part of my ladyfinger cake and dip it in the coffee mixture. When I use store-bought ladyfingers, a quick dip is all that is needed, but with this homemade version, I should have left it in longer because I didn't soak up enough of the liquid. I place the cake in a container and pour some of the cream on top. I even it out before I repeat for another layer. I then put the container in the fridge overnight. The next day I sift some cocoa powder on top. I would have preferred to do this before the overnight rest, but I didn't have any cocoa powder, so I had to wait. Now, aside from all the mistakes and room for improvement, this was not a disgusting dessert. I ate the whole darn thing and I enjoyed it. I've made tiramisu a few times and I've